Hi guys, so where I left off, well, first I want to thank everyone that is sharing the petition, signing the petition, everyone that is donating to the GoFundMe. Thank you so much. That means you guys heard my plea, my cry for help, and you guys are coming through and helping me, and I want to thank you so much. Anybody that is checking out the content on whether it's Facebook, Instagram. I just relaunched my Instagram, going back to it and adding more content because I haven't been on there forever. I will soon be doing a TikTok just as soon as I get a few moments. And I'm trying to continue with the YouTube. Thank you. Anywhere you support me over all platforms, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And on behalf of Marcello, he appreciates it too because it is his life, like his life. So you guys are helping me fight for his life. So I left off at after sentencing date. It's one thing that I did forget to mention. Actually, I don't know if I get to it later, but if I get to it later, I'll just repeat it. The judge. Okay, remember in the last video I was saying that an advocate came forward and was like, Marcello had no priors, and it's really odd. Nobody that doesn't have any prior record just jumps out and commits this type of crime. So they were just recommending him like 6 months of boot camp. And the judge batted that down like with the quickness. He was like, no, we're not even considering anything like that. He said that he felt that if Marcello Jackson was not stopped, the two guys would be dead. And Juju, you gotta be quiet or I can't record. Now, there's nothing in this case that is showing that they would have been dead. They weren't even like slapped or anything. Like, come on. There was no injury done to them. So how did the judge escalate it to they would be dead? There was nobody going to be dead because nobody was even hurt. So he was like, there's no way we're going to entertain any type of programs for him. He was only 19 at the time of the incident and 20 by the time he went to court. There was plenty room for him to, if they believed he committed these crimes, there was a lot of room to rehabilitate him. They did not even want to attempt that. That this was like a one-shot deal, and it's not like 3 strikes you're out. He was completely out on the first strike. The thing is, they never proved this case. They have no evidence that is proving that Marcello did any of this, and there's so many holes in this case. And then after that, the judge went on to say that if Marcello was his son, he too would want somebody to be lenient on Marcello. But he felt that if Marcello was not stopped, the two guys would be dead. So that is why he said he wants Marcello to feel the wrath of what he did for the rest of his life. Every day he wakes up, he really said, I want to give him life for this incident. But just so he has a second chance at life one day, I will only give him 40 years. Like 40 years was a vacation or something. 40 years is a lifetime. But we do still have to be grateful that he doesn't have life, or worse, he could have been on death row or something. The judge, I believe, was making an example of him. And I will get to that, more about that judge. Back then, that was those tough on crime era in Florida. Like you, any crime, you got mountains of time. And now, even today, the same charges that Marcello have do not even carry that the same amount of time. So, say the same thing happens to somebody today, they still wouldn't do as much time as Marcello. Possibly, they would get out before Marcello still. Let's continue. Back to this magnificent crime defense lawyer. His lawyer completely worked against him and wouldn't put up any defense. The lawyer completely worked against him and also the things that he told Marchello to do. Marchello said that he did not know how to drive a stick. So why would he even jump in the driver's seat anyway? He said, that makes no sense. Marchello said he wanted to testify and tell his side so that everyone would, know where he is coming from. And then he can tell them what really happened. The lawyer said that is not best. And then he said it's best to say that you do know how to drive a stick shift, but you just chose not to. I do not understand that logic behind that. And Marcello just persisted that he did not know how to drive a stick shift car. The lawyer also lied and said that he did not know that Marcello had family or had a child. When we came, that was a lie. He knew that Marcello had family. It was me and his daughter at every meeting with him. And my daughter would just be crawling all up his leg. And I'd be tapping her like, get down, get off the man's leg. She'd be all up on his desk and pushing the papers around. And he'll be like, oh, she's okay, she's okay. But then later he said, oh no, I wasn't aware that Marcello had any family. Okay, back to the reading. When we came to every appointment with him, my daughter stayed crawling up his leg, and he didn't know that he had family. And one of the worst things was that when I moved in with Marcello at his grandmother's house, he was still in jail. He was still in the county before getting out on bond. I moved in with his grandmother, and I started to move my things into his room. I happened to take the drawers of the dresser out to put my clothes in there. When I did so, I found behind the dresser a whole stack of letters. This is a whole other rabbit hole that seems to have nothing to do with the case. I found all these letters from a girl. The girl said things of this sort, that you're just in love with Keita, just go rub Keita's stomach. And the letters escalated, and they were over several dates. There were letters saying your grandmother was not there, Keita was not there, nobody was there but me. And I'm the only one that knows that you did not do this. But if you do not marry me and be with me, then I will make sure you get screwed through the system. This girl made threats that her uncle was the chief of police, which I and everyone else pretty much dismissed it because that sounds crazy. But she just kept saying how she was going to make sure he got screwed through the system. She would constantly harass me to the point that I filled out a restraining order against her. I don't know what his intentions was with this girl, but whatever the case, they were not worth his life. We took all these letters and we were like, can this girl be called to court to testify? And Marcello's lawyer, the crime defense specialist, said no, she is not a credible witness. She cannot be called to court. Very young and very dumb, we gave those letters to Marcello's lawyer. So I'm sure those letters do not even exist anymore. So there is no proof of that. But after I met with Marcello's lawyer after his sentencing date, the lawyer served me a paper. He said, here, this is something else that played a part in Marcello getting convicted. It was a written statement. Guess from who? The girl, the same girl. Wait, Juju, hold on. The same girl that the lawyer said was not credible enough to be called to court, but she was credible enough to make a written statement. In this written statement the lawyer gave me, she said that she spent the day in question with Marcello and that she braided his dreads. And while she was braiding his dreads, he was confessing to her about the crime he was about to commit. Now that part, there is no question. I know that is a lie. And how do I know that? Because that's the same day that I spent all day with Marcello. We had went to the movies. We spent the entire day together. I braided his dreads down. And then that's when later in the same evening, I dropped Marcello off on that corner. So that means I could have been a witness in his whereabouts. He was not with her. He was with me at that same time. There's no way he could have been with me and her at the exact same time. And I braided his dreads. How did they use her statement? but it was not presented during trial. How did they use her statement? One, because they said she wasn't credible, but also this statement was not presented during trial. I was at the trial, I know. So, a few things that don't make sense to me as well. The charges were dropped for robbery because the money did not add up. Even the judge said that you cannot hold that to him. So, they stacked charges against Marchello. Stacking charges is when you have one scenario or one act that happens. So they look at the act and they kind of break it down and they say, well, because this happened in this portion, we can give you this charge. And because at this point this happened, we can give you that charge. So they stack the charges up and they charge you with several charges. So by them stacking the charges, if you're just coming into this video, please go back and check out part one. Part one, I explained the whole scenario of what happened. And from that scenario, that is where they pulled all these charges. So they pulled 6 charges out on Marchello. It's really 3 charges, but it is 2 people, so they doubled the charge. So when they dropped the robbery, I don't understand how the other charges were able to stand. They were able to still, press the other charges. Okay, so 2 of the charges was the robbery, which they were supposed to be dropped to attempted robbery because really there was no reason. You would have to go back to part 2 to figure out why. Yeah, that was in part 2. No, I think that was in part 3. I'm so sorry. I'll just tell you since I'm all over the place. Okay, so they dropped the robbery charges because they said that the money that was taken from the victim slash witnesses did not add up. Marchello doesn't have that amount of money. So if the money doesn't add up, you can't prove that he took it from them. And the amount that they said that was stolen, Marchello wasn't found with it. So they was like, the judge said there's no way you can charge him for robbery because the money doesn't add up. That's like you charging somebody for stealing a ring, but the ring they have is completely different or it's cheaper, a cheaper version. It's not what you said was stolen from you. So that's why they had to drop it. But they picked it up as attempted robbery because the state lawyer argued back. Well, he tried to rob him. He did try. Even if he didn't rob him, he tried, so they gave him attempted robbery. Okay, so back to that scenario with the witness slash victim's account of that day. They said Marchello approached their car and made them get in the back seat. Well, at that point, that's considered carjacking. So they put 2 counts of carjacking on there, but they never even, oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. So they put 2 counts of carjacking on there. They also put 2 counts of napping on there because they said that the people were moved from their location. Remember, the victim slash witnesses said that they were at the club in the parking lot and Marchello made them get in the back seat. So approaching the car, that's the carjacking, and moving the vehicle. Once that vehicle moved, they considered that napping. So they put 2 charges of that. Horrible charges. Oh my gosh. But they never proved any of that. They never proved that this car was even at that club. And they wouldn't disprove that Marchello wasn't at the 7-Eleven like he said he was, or that he wasn't in the car prior to being picked up on the street. They wouldn't prove it and they wouldn't disprove anything. So they don't have anything pointing to anything, but they still gave them these heinous charges. Okay. Oh, and I skipped a fact. So with the carjacking, I explained the carjacking, but it doesn't make sense to me why there are 2 counts of carjacking. Remember, there's 2 counts because there's 2 people. So they gave the 2 counts of napping and 2 counts of attempted robbery. But how is there 2 counts of carjacking? Because there was only 1 car. He didn't do it, but if what they say is true, it was only 1 car that was carjacked. So how did they get those 2 counts? That to me seemed like that could be, double jeopardy. You can't have 2 counts unless you have 2 cars. He would have had to carjack 2 cars to have 2 counts. So they just stack all these charges up that they can get out of this instance. And to go back to the kidnapping, even if you move a person a couple feet, that is considered kidnapping. But they never proved where the crime scene even happened. They claimed it happened at the club, but they would not take the actions to prove it. How do they know that Marchello even took anybody against their will? And remember, Marchello was not even the driver. Always remember that. Why did they not care to get the second perpetrator that napped them, carjacked, and robbed them? So if this, put yourself in the victim slash witness's shoes, because I've been told to do that many times. If this happened to you, then you would want this to happen to them, and you would want them caught, and this and this and that. But let's be in the witness's shoes. If it were me, there's no way. Number one, when they took me from my location and drove off and all of this, I was so scared of them. They had a gun. They did, it was a 5-minute high speed chase, and then the doors of the car just, fly open and one just runs away. I would be so upset, and I would be telling the police, hey, one of them fled the scene. You need to go get the other one. This is only one of them. Like, you got to catch the other guy. Like, if that other guy is still out there, he can still come back for you, or, you know what I'm saying? You seen his face. You were able to identify him. Like, that doesn't make sense. Then, number two, I don't understand why they just upped and just ran to 2 different states. Why didn't they run together to one state? Why did they move from Florida to 2 different states? Like right away, like right after this happened, wouldn't come back to court, would none of this is adding up. These victims slash witnesses are acting as though they don't want anything to do with this. But if someone did these crimes to you, you would want something to do with it. You would want them caught. I would want them caught. That's why none of it doesn't add. It's like we have all these pieces, but these pieces, like, you ever had a jigsaw puzzle and you're trying to put 2 pieces you believe can fit, but they just won't fit. It's like in this situation, all of these pieces, none of them fit. And it's like the person just jammed them together to fit and made a flimsy case. The picture didn't even come out, clear, because it was pieces that didn't even fit that they put in there. It's pieces they took out. Is how does this case proceed all the way through a trial, a fair trial? Remember, we have the right to a fair trial. So it says at the bottom, I'm going to read that first. Marcello's lawyer was not for him at all. He actually worked against him. Worked against him in him meaning, had he just left that case alone, the trial would have passed. Nobody showed up. Marchello would have been set free. He took it upon himself to go out of town to make these people come to court, the victims slash witnesses that did not want nothing to do with the person that had robbed, carjacked, and kidnapped them. None of that adds up. Okay, and the second person never caught. Remember that too. So 11 years later, I contacted that crime specialist because after sentencing, even though the judge said 40, because they gave him a minimum mandatory of 10 years to 40, and I didn't understand what the minimum mandatory meant. So the judge said 40 years and the minimum mandatory of 10. The lawyer kept saying, oh, he'll be out in about 11 years. So I called him back because at that time, I didn't understand what the minimum mandatory meant. I was explained that he has to do 10 years day for day. but that they can keep him up to 40. So I called to see like what's going to happen, and I talked to the lawyer. His secretary told me that what I was believing is wrong. 40 means 40. And she ended up giving the lawyer the word that I had called, and he said he'd call me back. And I went on to explain to him who I was. I didn't think he would remember me after that long. And when I said my name and said his name, he was like, "Oh, I remember y'all." He said, "I'll never forget that case." He said, "Do you know it was a lot of black men being railroaded at that time? And because of that case, I don't even practice that kind of law anymore." Then he ended the conversation with, "Just hope that the laws in Florida change." So my hopes that something could be done after 10 years was instantly pulled from under me. So people always ask me, how is it that I waited that long for Marcello? Well, I never intended to wait this long for Marcello because he did tell me, he has to do the 10, but after that they can see, what's going on and possibly be released. It was never clearly laid out to me that 40 was 40, that meant 40 years. How in the world would I have ever been able to even try to sign up to wait for 40 years and I'm only 20 years old? That didn't make sense. But to wait, I waited that 10 years day for day. And when I was looking for relief and hope that, oh, okay, so maybe soon now he's going to get out, I was told that no, 40 means 40. So I already went 10 years down this road. And I'm like, what? Like the whole rug was just pulled from under me. And that's when I set a new goal date. I was like, okay, well, I'll continue with my project, Reach the World. And I know that when somebody hears his story, I'll just continue to do everything. Like I've met some people. I thought somebody was gonna catch on to the story, like Tom Joyner, Steve Harvey, Michael Baisden, Al Sharpton. I've gotten my story of Marcello to all of these people. To what's his name? You have to check out that What is Project Reach the World. You'll see all the people I've gotten it to. Um, I still can't remember his name. Ricky Smiley. I've gotten it to many people. And I thought, yeah, it's just a matter of time when this story breaks out, then, but I gave myself the time frame of once my daughter turns 18, if he's not out, then I would have to leave. But that's more difficult than I thought. How do you leave somebody after being by their side for 18 years? So now that's where I'm at. My daughter is now 19, going on 20. So I don't know what's the new goal. All right, so let's continue. Reaccounts of inconsistencies and it don't add up. Why was the second perpetrator said to have not been caught and the whole ordeal fell on Marcello being the mastermind? The rumor mill in the family and the neighborhood said that DJ was caught. Marcello was switched from the public defender that he had in the beginning because it was said that he and his cousin had the same public defender. And I guess that's why we ended up with this crime specialist. But I think the public defender probably would have done a better job. And the public defender said that he cannot defend both sides of the case. He was then given a lawyer that was not a public defender, but he said that he was a crime specialist or something fancy that they called him. This lawyer, I believe, worked against Marcello. All it seemed that he wanted Marcello to do was to plea. We asked the new lawyer if they could pull the surveillance at the 7-Eleven to prove that Marcello was there. He said no, because that costs too much money to do so, and his firm does not have that type of resources. We then asked if they could pull the surveillance at the club to prove that he wasn't there. The lawyer said no, because they don't have surveillance cameras outside the club. It was a Sunday night, and I have driven past that club on Sundays. Usually there are people in the cars in the parking lot. But during the testimony, they say no one was outside and the parking lot was empty except for the guys in the car. They never let him prove his whereabouts. Also, Sunday was a club night. This incident with Marcello happened, it had to be the late 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock hour. If you know of a club, the club ain't even starting at that point. And if someone is in the parking lot, and this is not just a club, this is a club in a hotel, people are just getting ready to go to the club. So I don't believe that it would be vacant at that point. I mean, completely vacant. Nobody in the parking lot, nowhere. Like, that does not make sense. He had a public defender, a prison deliverer. That is actually a part from a rap that I did. His public defender played a big role in his wrongful conviction. 16 ways that Marcello's public defender failed him, how his own public defender helped him get convicted more than just trying to force him to plea. This video speaks about the wrongful conviction of Marchello Jackson. One of the biggest factors in Marchello getting convicted was because of his public defender and his bad representation. Going to court with a public defender, which is a court appointed attorney, is not always the wisest thing to do. But often the lack of money to pay a real trial lawyer results in having to do so. Marcello felt forced to plea instead of preparing to fight during trial. Guilty or not guilty, he's done enough time. He would be home now if he didn't go to trial. Why didn't he just take the plea? Prison wife story time, he deserves a retrial. He'd be home. This is a prison wife story time about standing by my husband the time leading up to his trial and my reaction to the verdict at his court date. This speaks about why you should take the plea bargain even if you are innocent. Really, there is no such thing as a fair trial. There is so much willing and dealing that goes on behind the scenes of a trial. How long do we have to wait for justice? And in this video, I'm just talking about we really wish he had to just not went to trial. Maybe, if he hadn't went to trial, he took that time. He still could have fought for his innocence to overturn it, but I don't know if it would have been harder or whatever. But at least he would have been out like maybe 4 years ago had he not went to trial and just took that plea that was being forced upon him. We thought justice really exists. Now we know better. That also comes from song lyrics. Is I thought that justice really exists. Now I see that it exists only for the rich. Only for the rich. Only if you can afford top legal defense should you ever go to trial. Other than that, or maybe if you have a lawyer that's a family member or a good friend. But other than that, I would not recommend going to trial, whether you feel you're innocent or not. You're risking and gambling with your life. I wish we had have just took the plea. Why didn't he just take the plea? Prison wife story time. He deserves a retrial. He'd be home. Continued. This is the second part of that video. When facing a plea bargain, one has to not only consider if they committed the crime or not. The real fact to ponder is whether you want to spare whatever portion of your life that you can, because they coming for your head if you lose that trial, which they're ensuring that you lose it because they're taking out evidence, they're not taking testimonies, they're putting testimonies that shouldn't be so they're ensuring that you lose. So when you do lose, they are going to throw the book at you. Okay, guys. Thank you. I guess before I close this out, I want to talk about something that happened to me just yesterday. Yesterday, I was in the Wawa and I was standing behind somebody. They were conversating on the phone, but she was kind of loud. The line was long as ever. So I just went in to get a soda for my cousin. And I'm standing behind this girl and she's talking on the phone and she's like, so how much is the plea? And I'm like, that put my alerts on, like I'm listening now. You don't want to listen to nobody conversation, but so she's like, how much is the plea? How long is the plea? And of course, I couldn't hear who was on the phone. And all I heard her come back and say was, "Well, they don't have any DNA on you. They don't have anything. They just messing with you. They're messing with your head." And she was going back. I can only hear her responses. And she was like, "So you're considering a plea? Like what?" And oh my gosh, if it wasn't so rude to be nosy, I would love to pull this girl to the side and be like, "Girl, look, this is the real. This is the real. They don't need no DNA. They don't need no evidence. Girl, whoever you talking to, let them know." Like really. But that would have been rude, but it possibly could save his life. Oh, that's crazy. I wish somebody had a told Marcello that and told me that, because we it could have saved our lives. It would have saved me a 20-year fight, and it would have saved him 20 years of being, well, okay, 4 years, because he would have been out 4 years ago. So he still probably would have had to do that time, but he would have been out, and we wouldn't be, don't know if you'll ever come home, or, you know. But yeah, so if you know anybody that is going through trial, it is very scary. Please support them. The more family that they have, the more family that is involved in the process, friends, loved ones that's involved in the process, they will see that they cannot just, this person matters to somebody, and they cannot just railroad them. When you see, we were like sitting ducks. It was just me. And that looks as though he has no family, nobody. And they just felt like, hey, we can do pretty much what we want to him. This guy, this thug with these dreads, and he's we're clearing up the streets and stuff. And never looked at the facts. Never, they wouldn't even, the jury, I always wondered, like, when I was crying, and because you can't contain yourself, like, sometimes they never looked my way, and I wondered why that was, and I didn't know. I was told that they instruct the jury to not look at the family because they don't want the family to play any type of role in how they would decide. But it's crazy. And anybody that does go to jury duty, please take it serious. A lot of people get upset because they have to miss work. They have to, but you have a human's life in your hand. And everybody that comes to trial is not guilty. Some are guilty and some are not. That is why you are there, to listen to all the facts. Don't try to get out of it. Make a pact that you will listen to all the facts, and you will give that person a fair trial, because that's what we need in our justice system. We need them to stop forcing people to plea. They're forcing people into these pleas. And we need them to play out the fair trial, like we're told we have these freedoms, and we don't really. You think you have it, but you don't. So thank you for your support in this journey. Please remember to like, share, subscribe. You also have to hit the notification bell if you want to see when I upload videos. Um, Check out the GoFundMe in the description box, and also the petition as well. Check that out. I don't know which one is going to move first, but I got to get something moving. It's time for him to come home. Once again, explain it, if even if you feel like he is guilty, even after me explaining each point, he's already done 20 years, so it doesn't make sense for him to still be there. There are people that kill people and get less time. Their manslaughter carries less time. Like, why? And what I did forget to explain, I know I'm gonna get the comments that, oh well, if he had that many charges, that's how he got the 40 years. It's not. They can charge you in two different ways. They can charge you consecutively, or they can charge you concurrently. So consecutively means that if he had 40 years on each charge, he would have to serve 40 years for charge one. And then after he finishes serving for charge one, the second charge, he would start on that date, 40 years for charge two. And then after 40 years, that'll be 80 years. So after the 80 years, then charge three, he would serve 40 years. That's consecutive. Some people do have consecutive sentences. Fortunately, the judge gave Marchello a concurrent sentence, which meant that all six charges, he is serving on all six charges at the same time. So charge one through six all start on the same date, and they all end, except for that 30-year charge, they all end on the same date. So it is six charges, but they condensed it to the 40 years. Now, to hear what the crimes are, then I know it's going to come back. Oh, yeah, that was worth, no, it wasn't worth 40 years, because you have to sentence according to sentencing guidelines. During that time, all the charges that Marchello was given, the kidnapping, the carjacking, and the robbery, all of them fell under something called 1020 life. If you committed, it's a whole list of crimes, which I should do a video about that. It's a whole list of them. So any of the crimes that's on that list, if you committed any of them with a weapon, but remember, the weapon was never found, but if you committed any of them with a weapon and you just had the weapon, it is 10 years. That's why that was that minimum mandatory of 10 years. So the judge could not have given Marchello no less than 10. The judge decided himself to go up to 40. So it was 10 was the minimum that he can give him. If you did any of those crimes and you fired the weapon, the gun, 20 years. Any crime, the carjacking, weapon was fired, that's 10 years. I mean, that's 20 years. Kidnapping, weapon fired, that's 20 years. Robbery, weapon fired, there's 20 years. If any of those charges, somebody was hurt, injured, killed, it's life. It becomes life. So that's where you get the 1020 life. Okay, even though they botched Marcello's case from beginning to end, if you look at the facts, the gun doesn't really even exist, but it was never fired. Nobody ever testified that it was fired. So, though we don't really even know there was a gun, but they say it was a gun, it was never fired. And nobody was injured or hurt. So, by it not being fired, that clears that 20 years off the table. And by it not anybody getting hurt, that clears that life off the table. So how was he able to decide, I'm gonna forget this sentencing guideline, and I'm gonna charge him past the 10 years that's recommended? How did he make that judgment? And I know a judge is a judge, but is he able to choose his own sentencing guidelines? This is where I need help figuring this out. I do need to research this. Is he able to just say heck with whatever the sentencing guidelines are? I'm going to make my own, and I want to sentence him to this, because that's pretty much what happened to Marchello. But I also have to let you know, during that time, that same judge, just a year or so after sentencing Marchello, he was running for Supreme Court judge. So he was trying to build up his, record that he's tough on crime and this and that. So Marchello ended up being one of his, to help build his reputation. So he helped build his reputation on Marcello's back and my family's back. So that's why he kind of didn't he didn't follow like crazy. I guess his promotion was worth it. A life, and probably not just Marcello's life. I'm sure it's many people's lives. Many people. I feel sorry and pray for anybody that sat under that judge, because I doubt they probably got a fair shot. All right, thank you guys. It's your girl Cadillac. It's your girl Cadillac.